Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater. And it is my honor today to welcome to the show Alicia Malone, who is a host of Turner Classic Movies and is the host of TCM Imports, showcasing cinematic treasures from around the world each Sunday. Alicia is an authority on classic, independent, and foreign films and is passionate about supporting women in film. As an author, Alicia has 3 books: Backwards and in Heels, The Past, Present, and Future of Women Working in Film; The Female Gaze, Essential Movies Made by Women, which explore the accomplishments and obstacles women have faced throughout cinema's history. She also has given 2 TEDx talks on the subject. And her new book, which we're talking about today, is Girls on Film. I'll put it closer so we can see. Lessons from a Life of Watching Women in Movies. Alicia, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it.
I absolutely love this book. I literally devoured it. I was finding I could relate to so much of it, but then learn so much at the same time for a variety of discoveries, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I absolutely loved it. I wanted to start by asking, because this book, it's part film analysis, part film history, and part memoir. What to you is the most important thing for readers to take away from it?
Well, I love that you said that you could relate to a lot of the stories, because that was really what I wanted to get across, was that we as film lovers, we have our differences, but we all have our similarities as well. And I knew by being personal for the first time, my other 2 books were not personal in nature, that I would hopefully be able to encourage some of that relatability, to show myself as I really am throughout watching movies, throughout my history of watching movies. I thought that was important. And as someone who is a naturally quiet and shy person, I had to write like no one was ever going to read this book in order to be personal. But that was the main thing I wanted to get across, was just that relatability. And then hopefully, like you said as well, hopefully teach some things at the same time, but just how express the joy of watching movies and how movies have shaped all of our lives.
You said something interesting, was something that I didn't know, and I'm actually quite surprised that you said you were very shy and introverted. You said as a child it would be terrifying even to talk to someone you didn't know. For people who are very shy and very introverted but want to be like yourself, a host, a film reporter, or an actor, an interviewer, how do you what would you advise them to do to help them with that?
Well, the thing that I found helpful was following my passion. So, although I was very shy, I found when I was trying to create my unsuccessful film club during high school, I found that I had the confidence to get up in front of the entire school and talk about movies, because it was something that I felt very passionately about, and I felt that everyone should watch these movies. I also was kind of the fake it till you make it kind of person, the pretend you have confidence until you have confidence. And then that can get a little tricky later on, when I started to wonder, like, is this who I am really? Like, or is this a creation that I
Right.
have devised in order to just feel confident and feel like a different person? But it definitely helped me to just pretend to be confident, and to know that when you're public speaking, mostly people, I remember I did this class on public speaking, and we had to get up and do a little talk about anything. And then people in the audience would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous they thought you were. And you would say your number. And I'd be like, I was a 10. I was so nervous. And everyone was like, you were a 3. You were totally
Right.
fine. And so I realized that people don't actually realize how nervous you are. So you can use that. But having the passion to fuel you, to feel like there's a purpose bigger than yourself, I think that was what really gave me the confidence to get up and speak in front of the camera. And I'm still a naturally shy and quiet person, but I can definitely talk about films.
I love it. Yeah, no, you certainly fooled me, but I think that's great advice. I think the more, because I was always very timid growing up, just lacked confidence. And then once, the obsession for film came into my life, and acting and theater, suddenly I could get up on a stage when I had no confidence, or talk to
Yeah.
you today and have no confidence in myself whatsoever. But I know what you mean. That love just carries just kind of takes over your soul, so to speak.
Exactly. And I also found when it came to talking about women on film, that really
Mm,
helped because I felt like there was a bigger purpose than just being about me, that maybe I could use the platform to speak about, to amplify other people's work. And that gave me more confidence as well, because I was like, this is something I believe in. It doesn't matter about me or how nervous I am. It's for something bigger than that.
yeah, I like that a lot. And I know you talked about that in the book. And I was curious what you feel people can do to champion female filmmakers. I mean, what's the best thing people can do?
I think the best thing people can do is watch the movies, because obviously the Hollywood follows the money. And so if you can watch movies and talk about these movies directed by women at the same rate that we talk about movies directed by men, I think that really helps. To if you're on social media, to use those platforms to support movies that you really appreciate directed by women, and just to continue to have these kind of conversations, I think is important. I was angry at myself, like I write in my book, when I found out that, when I realized, like, oh, I've only been watching movies made by men as a child, and I loved these male film critics, and I read books that were written by men. There were lots of other works written by women that were in existence, but they weren't as prevalent as the ones by men. So I felt like I had robbed myself of some great experiences by only realizing that later on. So the more variety of voices you can consume, whether it's people making films or people writing about films, I think that is very important.
I was angry at myself too, because I had the same discovery. I was like, wait a minute, I'm being filtered through a male perspective, and there's so, I mean, like, as you notice, I'm wearing my Elaine May shirt. She's
Yay.
one of my favorite filmmakers, as well as Lilia Cavani and so many. And it's just, we're just unfortunately way behind in discussing so many female filmmakers, as well as championing filmmakers of the future. So I noticed that you had talked about social media sort of taking a toll on you, with like negative comments and people bullying you or making fun of you, and also people supporting what you were saying. For people who do want to champion, use social media, as of course it's a powerful tool to talk about these issues, but they also find that it takes a toll on their mental health or emotional
Mm.
health. What do you think is the best way around something like that?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because these platforms can be wonderful to help amplify voices and to spread the word about films, for example, made by other women or made by people of color. But then you can also get shouted off the platform by people not feeling like you have a place in talking about these movies. And so I really believe, like, what works for you personally. So for me, it was taking a real toll. I wish I was someone who had a tougher skin when it came to negative comments, but one negative comment could ruin my day, even if it
Right.
was preceded by 200 positive comments. And I also felt like I wasn't deserving of the adulation or the hate. I was like, I'm just someone who talks about movies. I don't even make movies. So I was uncomfortable as well with people being like, I love you. I was like, thanks. So for me, it's just more healthy for my mental health to be off those platforms and to not read anything about
Right.
myself, like no reviews, no comments, no nothing to do with me. I just know that for me is the personal way. And so if that is also your case, then I would say to, start a blog, or to try to use other platforms that maybe are more restrictive or more careful with the comments that they allow,
Right.
and just make
Yeah.
sure that you protect yourself. I think that's really important.
That's a good idea. I like that. I wanted to jump back on early in your life where you started this film club. I
Yeah.
love that, in high school, and you got up on the stage at an assembly and sort of gave your pitch about why everyone should join the film club. So I'm curious. I'm curious what exactly your pitch was back then, and
Yeah.
what would it be now? If anything, would you say anything different now?
Well, I didn't really consider my audience back then. So I thought, I love Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane taught me so much about films and about the making of the movies and how you could use editing and deep focus photography and all of these techniques in order to tell a story. And I really believed that other people would want to watch Citizen Kane. I went to an all girls school. No teenage girl wanted to watch Citizen Kane. So I remember getting up on assembly and I remember being quite like angry when I was speaking. And for some reason I was like, you have to watch this movie. It just kind of came from nowhere, this anger that I have to make sure people watch Citizen Kane. It's so important. So I think if I did anything differently now, I would think more carefully about the audience and try to get them in with something more fun, like a Singing in the Rain or something that's
Right.
very entertaining that shows that classic films are not boring like they may think and can open the door to have other experiences and other chats like Singing in the Rain. You can talk about the history of film and the move from silent films to sound, opens up all those doors as well as just being a very entertaining musical. So that's what I would do differently than I did back then. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking for programming. Citizen
I
Kane,
love
no
it.
one came, and so
I'm actually
the
very surprised to hear that young girls wouldn't want to see Citizen Kane.
yeah,
How dare
how
they?
dare they? Exactly. I was very adamant back then.
Yeah, no, I love that story. Why do you think people have such a, not that everybody, but people who, if they are, in their 20s, 30s, even older, and they mainly know films from the 80s and forward or the 70s and forward. Why do you think going in the past is so hard? Why is black and white so
Mm,
difficult? I was curious what
yeah.
you thought.
Yeah, black and white seems to be a real obstacle, like subtitles as well. It's like
Yeah,
anything that they're not used to seeing. Also, classic films were so carefully written, but they were very slow edited. They have long scenes which don't cut away. This was before all the special effects and the fast cuts that we get today. So it definitely demands more of your attention, and the focus is on the words and the characters rather than on the images on screen. So that can be difficult for people to just get their head around. But I really firmly believe, I still do, that people will watch Citizen Kane and love it. No, that if you can get people in the door to watch classic films, they will find something they love because these movies are classic for a reason. They have stories that are timeless. And I think because they had to focus so much on storytelling and character rather than a lot of special effects and action, that
right.
they last the test of time because they were so well crafted and well thought out. So it's just about getting people in the door, taking away their devices, strapping them to the chair, Clockwork Orange style, getting
Oh
them to
God,
watch
yeah, I
it,
love
and
it.
then I believe then people will find their own way. Also, always try to think about what do people love today, because everything today was influenced by what came before it. So trying
Right.
to make those connections, like you love Star Wars, well, George Lucas was very inspired by Kurosawa. So we should try one of his
Yeah.
films and see how it correlates to something that you love today.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really good answer.
And also just to not be a gatekeeper. I never want to be one of those people that's like, oh, you don't know these films? Like, you don't know film.
Yeah.
It's like, great, you've never seen this movie before. This is going to be
Yeah.
amazing. Let's watch it together. You don't
Yeah.
have
It's
to know
like
anything to
you're
enjoy it.
so exactly. You're so lucky that this is your first time seeing
Yeah, I'm
it.
jealous of you.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
for the first time. I know that when you started in television, in television production, you moved to Sydney when you were 19. I was curious, how did your parents feel about you going into film and TV?
Yeah, they were worried about me. I think they would have personally preferred me to go to university or to college and get a degree, no matter what it was in, just to have that sense of security. But I was really, again, I just thought I want to work in television. I didn't think that I would be able to work in film. So I focused on television. I thought also television feels very fast paced and immediate. And I thought that would be exciting. So I just made that decision. So they were worried about me. I moved out of home the day after I graduated high school, and I had no money, no contacts, no nothing, much like when I moved from Sydney to LA. And again, they were like, how are you going to survive? And I was, I'll figure it out. So now they're very proud of everything that I've done. But of course, at first they were worried about me. And I started in TV when I was 18, and I was working in a very male-dominated newsroom. And so it was me as like an 18-year-old girl surrounded by these men in their 40s and 50s. And so they were worried about that dynamic.
Mm.
But I was just so excited to be involved in television that they could see that I had that passion. And of course, they supported me in that.
And when you say that you felt that the fact that TV was more fast paced, that would be more
Mm.
exciting to you as opposed to film, but being such a big film buff, was it that you just felt that film was going to, it's a slower process if you're on one project for a longer period of time? Was that
Yeah.
the main attraction for towards television?
Yeah, I read a lot of film books, growing up, and of course back in the studio era they pumped out the films quite fast, but I
Yeah.
knew that the movies that were more of the modern day, they took a long time. So I felt like I would have to be really passionate about a story in order to want to work on it for that long. I did think at one point that I wanted to be a director, but again, I hadn't seen many examples of female directors. We had Jane Campion, New Zealand, but we say she's
Yeah.
Australian, and Gillian Armstrong, Australian, and I knew them, but they seemed like particular types of women that they were very tough and they could command a crew, and I didn't think I would be able to do the same as someone who is so shy. And now I feel like I just don't have that visual brain that directors need. So I know that I made the right choice there. But I didn't think I could see a place for myself in film. Plus, I knew it just demanded a lot of attention. So I felt like TV was fast paced and could be really exciting to be involved in and still be creative and still be about creating imagery and using that technical equipment. So that excited me. I didn't think that I could work in television about film, but of course, that ended up being the perfect combination for me.
Yes, yes, no, the living the dream. That's for sure. When you went to the States, I'm curious because as someone from Canada, I know getting the working visa to go to the States is
Mm.
like a nightmare. So I was curious, how did you get that?
I know that was one thing that a lot of my friends and family said to me, like, how are you going to get a visa? And I was like, I'll figure it out. But I managed to get a journalist visa, which
Right,
allowed me to work over in the US in this journalism, and that could be quite broad. So it was about film criticism and film interviews. The tricky part was that I couldn't work anywhere else but in entertainment.
right,
So I
right.
couldn't work at a bar. I couldn't work as a waitress. I would have gladly to make money, but I had to work specifically within journalism and entertainment. So that was scary, but it was also kind of a motivation. If I'm going to pay the rent, I've got to get a job. So I had to figure it out really quickly. But that visa was fairly easy to get, and then from there I got the O1 visa, alien with extraordinary abilities, which made me feel like a superhero. And then I was able to get the green card after that.
Okay, that's great. And this, I love. It almost gave me anxiety to hear about your press junket days. I mean, just
Oh my gosh.
calling the stars out on the red carpet. I thought, oh my god, that sounds like such a daunting task. But you've interviewed, literally everybody: Oprah, Al Pacino, Margot Robbie. I
Hmm.
was, when you only have 4 minutes with these people, I love that you asked for a hug as a way to
Hmm.
stand out. You dyed your hair red because everybody was blonde. Um, so how did you frame, like, I imagine they get asked a lot of the same questions. So did you
Mm.
try to frame your questions in a way that would be different for them, or do they just expect the same questions?
Yeah, this was the tough part because obviously when you have a 4 minute interview and you know you have to create a story for your outlet that gives certain basic information for the audience to know. They want to know the basics about what a film is about and who's in it and how they enjoyed working in it. So you know you have to cover the
Yeah,
basics, which
right.
everyone does. But I was always trying to think of an interesting way in, and I got really good at what I call the segues to make it feel like it's one conversation, but to pick up on something that they've answered and then work it into my next question. So it seems like I am having a conversation, but really I'm getting to my next point and trying to just frame it in a different way So I would still get the answer that I needed, but it would sound slightly different. And I always wanted to try to prove that, like, I know about film and I'm
Right.
a film nerd, So I'd always try to drop references in. Like, I noticed that this felt a little bit Hitchcockian, and they'd go like, "Ooh," you know?
Oh
And then that
yes,
would
you know
lead me to
movies.
some basic question. But and then it's funny. One thing I realized is junkets. They say, and I've noticed I say this too when I'm getting interviewed. Someone says, "That's a really interesting question," and you think, "Yes," but really they're like, "I got to figure out how to answer what you just asked me because it's really out there and strange because of the way I phrased it." They're like,
Oh
"That's an
damn! I just
interesting
thought I was so good all
question."
this time
I
because
know. So Oprah was like, "That's a really interesting
yeah.
question, Alicia." I was like, "Thank you, Oprah." But really, she was just like, "What the hell is she asking me? Let me think about this for a second."
Mm, mm. Oh God, I won't forget that. I love that. That's a good. That's definitely good to know.
Yeah.
I was curious if you still throw up after horror films when
Oh,
you mentioned in the book.
not anymore, but I'm still terrified by them. So
Yeah.
yeah, when I was a kid, I went through a phase. Every horror film I saw, I would throw up afterwards
Oh
because I was so
God.
scared. I mean, even as a teenager, and even seeing something like Scream, which
Mm,
is not necessarily that scary, but because it was sort of pointing out the things about a movie while also doing those things, it made me scared in a whole new way because it was so self-aware. So now I no longer throw up, luckily, but I don't gravitate to watch horror
yeah.
films.
Neither do I.
I do see them, like I do like to keep up with them, but I will still hide. And afterwards, I'll always go home and just think that's going to happen to me. Like Paranormal Activity, I couldn't sleep for several nights
Oh my
because I
God.
felt like a
Yeah.
ghost was going to pull me off my bed by my ankle.
Right.
Like it's funny that you really believe that what you just saw is going to happen to you, even though logically that you're in the same place as you were the night before. The only thing that's changed is you've seen a movie.
Right. It's always that possibility, that smidge
Yeah.
of something supernatural coming in. I know because
Mm.
I like a lot of the classic horror films. The Haunting and Rosemary's Baby and so many. But I used to have a co-host on my show, and for he loves horror. So for a whole month, we during Halloween we did, and I couldn't sleep so many nights, and or I was just grossed out by some of the ones he liked. But I could relate to that because it's not my cup
Preferred
of tea
genre.
either.
No.
Something you said in the book that I was really popped out to me was that you always trusted your inner voice. So as
Mm.
you said, you were in a trip in Paris and your inner voice was saying go to Hollywood, and your inner voice during the pandemic was saying go to go to a small town where you live now. I was curious if your inner voice has ever led you somewhere that disappointed you, or is
No,
it
it really
always
hasn't.
reliable?
It's always right. And the only times I've got myself into trouble is not listening to that voice and not believing it and saying, "Oh, no, I'm just being silly," or "No, that can't be true," or "Oh, I don't know, that seems too risky." If I apply logic to the voice, then that's where I go wrong. But if I hear that voice, and some people may say it's God or your intuition or whatever it is to you, it's that inner voice, that gut instinct has never failed me. So I just have to always remind myself to listen to that voice and try to listen to it. And as I say in my book, I was sort of drowning it out by all the modern day distractions of social media and screens and phones and YouTube and everything else. And so once I quietened that down, I could hear that inner voice more clearly and telling me and guiding me the way.
When you did the Reframing Classic series on TCM, I was curious how people responded to that because just on social media there was a very mixed reaction.
Mm.
Some people got threatened by it. They thought the films were going to be canceled, and I know that you and your other co-hosts, very carefully made it clear that wasn't the case. I was
Mm.
curious just what kind of feedback you got about that from the TCM fan base.
Well, luckily, I was in my blissful bubble being off social media and not reading any comments. So I was
True, true.
enjoying the whole process. But no, I did hear from people that it was very mixed, that people were concerned that we were going to be canceling the movies when in fact we were doing the opposite. We were playing the movies and then having conversations about them. But recently at the TCM Film Festival, they did an in-person a panel about the reframing classics and about all these murky ideas of do we play John Wayne movies knowing that he was a horrible person in his real life? Or, do we celebrate Woody Allen with his
Right.
situation? And all of those impossible to answer questions, the art versus the artist. And that panel was packed. People were lining up to see it, and people were really interested and involved in it. And I think it's such a fascinating conversation, and one, again, no easy answers, no right or wrong. A lot of it is up to your personal feelings about whether you want to watch a film, directed by Roman Polanski or not. And so it's so interesting. I personally, again, not knowing a lot of the comments, just found so much value, because I love learning my own blind spots, and going and doing research and reframing my ideas about films, watching them in a new light. I think that's what's so valuable about classic films, is that they're not museum pieces that you're not allowed to criticize. You can get them out of the box. You can play with them. You can say what you like, what you don't like, what you don't understand, and it can spur you on to learning more about world history, about politics, about society. I mean, so many different topics. And that's what I discovered in writing this book. Was I thought that I gravitated towards classic films for answers, that I always watched
Right.
these movies trying to figure out who I was and my place in the world. But actually, I find I watch them for questions, because they do lead me down these rabbit holes of research and finding out more about the world. And I personally love that. I like being in the gray area of
Mm,
not right or wrong, but being
me
able
too.
to say, I'm not sure, I don't have the answers, but this is what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It makes it for stimulating conversations. And as you pointed out, with like a film like Imitation of Life, in a lot of ways, it was so bold and so progressive. But then, of course, in some ways, it's not. I think it was a really, really great series
Mm.
to focus on. You also mentioned in the book Smooth Talk, which is a film I had been meaning to see for a while, thanks to the Criterion Channel. I mean, I'm endlessly going through that app, and
Yes.
there's so many films I hadn't even heard of that I've discovered. And this was one by Joyce Chopra that I hadn't heard of. And when you wrote about it in the book, I thought I gotta watch this film. So I
Mm.
did, and I absolutely loved it. And I was curious because I know that there's a couple of interviews you did with them, the cast and the writer and the director. And I was curious, because that film made such an impression on you when you were growing up. What was it like to then talk to the people who made it?
Yeah, it was amazing to get to meet Joyce Chopra, and also to talk to Joyce Carol Oates as well, legendary writer whose short story the film is based on, and Laura Dern and Treat Williams, who scared me in the film, but such a nice person in real life.
Yeah.
But getting to hear their ideas of the movie, because you watch a film at an impressionable age, as I watched that one as a teenager, and I saw so much of my own story in that film. But of course, that might not necessarily have been what they were intending to make. And I loved, again, that's another great thing about films, is that you can have a completely different perspective of the movie than the person sitting next to you in the
Right.
audience, or the people
Right.
that made the film. And they can be, you bring your own identity to watching a movie. And
Yes.
so you can have a different interpretation of it than even the people who wrote the film and directed the film. So that's what I liked about getting to meet them and hear their perspective of how they approached the film, what kinds of themes that they were drawing on when they were making it, and where they were in their lives, and what they brought to the films, again, their own identity to the movie. And I was able to say, well, I always felt like this. And they say, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I remember Joyce Carol Oates at one point said, I hadn't thought of that until now, but that's really interesting. I was like, thank you. Again, very interesting. Is yeah. So it was that was really, really fun to get to hear what they thought about making the movie. And I guess that's true of films and books and all works of art, that once you create them, you
Yes.
put it out to the world, and then no longer belongs to you. It's how the audience interprets them and takes them and uses their own perspective.
Yeah, no, and those are the kind of movies I love the most. My channel here, exploring storytelling, is, what are the movies that involve the audience, like the ones that are subjective and ambiguous, and so they're not just feeding you answers and one and done. That I can see this Smooth Talk, again, and probably feel like I had never seen it before. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much that's complicated about it, and ambiguous, and the relationships and the details and the performances. I mean, it was just stunning. I just thought it was such a stunning work of art. I always ask people this: if you, for some reason, could only watch five movies that you love for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
That's a good, interesting question.
Interesting
Let me think
question.
about it. I would definitely pick The Apartment. I mean, that's
Oh
usually my
yeah, that's
answer
right.
as my favorite film when people ask me what your favorite film is. And of course, that changes my favorite film, but it's one that I have revisited throughout my life and I felt very differently about as I've grown older. When I was younger, I related to one character. As I was older, I related to a different character. So I think that's a film I would definitely watch because I think I'll continue to relate to it in a different way
I
as
love that
I
movie.
keep going. Love
Yeah.
that movie. I would also say Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which I
Oh
speak
yeah.
about in my book
Yes.
because that was a film that was so important to me as a kid. It's something that I still enjoy watching, and sometimes there's real comfort in seeing a movie that you know so well, and you know all the quotes, and you know how it ends, and it's a happy movie to watch. Also, to that end, I would say Singing in the Rain, just because
Mm,
that's a film that is kind of the ultimate comfort movie you can put on no matter what, no matter how you feel, and you can't help but smile at seeing Gene Kelly splashing in puddles. I mean,
it's
it's
so
just such
good.
a joyful film.
Yeah.
Um, I would also say I love The Hitchhiker by Idle
Oh
Kino.
yes, yes.
And that's a film that is shows that, you know, women were directing film noirs, you know,
Yeah.
back in the 40s and 50s, and how it's really tautly done. It's a tense thriller, and it's like 72 minutes. It's a great work in masterful filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then I
Very
would
creepy.
also yeah, very creepy.
Yeah.
And then I would also say Daughters of the Dust by Julie
Oh
Datch,
yeah.
because it's a film that I am continuing to learn about. And there's so much in there, again, when it comes about history. I mean, just learning about the history of that part of the country, and the types of families were living there, and the different languages used. And it's a movie that I just find more and more value in, and more to research every time I watch it, because it covers so many different bases, and it's just beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
It's just a gorgeous film.
Yeah. Those are all great choices. I'm not one Australian one.
Oh, I know. Sorry,
That's all right.
sorry.
That's all right. I still have to see My Brilliant Career. I have it
Oh
on my
yes.
watch list, and I just haven't gotten it to it yet. Well, the book again, the new book that just came out in the last couple of few months, Girls on Film: Lessons from a Life of Watching Women and in Movies. This is a film that, you know, every film lover, film buff, anyone who even likes movies should read, because I think it's a phenomenal book.
Thank
So
you.
Alicia, thanks again. I really appreciate that you took the time to come on. I hope I'm not embarrassing you by saying I just really admire all that you do.
Oh,
Your
thank you.
TEDx talks I found were really moving, and in your championing of female filmmakers, and being unapologetically yourself, which is hard for anyone in this
Yes.
world. But there's a lot of great advice for anyone, just to navigate through life. I found in the book. So
Thank
thanks so
you.
much. I hope that you could come
Thank
again
you.
sometime.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time to read my book and talk with me about it. It was fun. Thank you.
No,
Nice to
anytime.
meet you.
You as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and/or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of my YouTube channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I've ever recorded can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon for their ongoing support. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out, and it is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which as a member, you will very much have access to vote on, which will make you part of the decision-making as to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also support my YouTube channel by leaving a donation if you like at kofi.com YouTube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. The link is in the description box below. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.